Welcome back to another episode of Murder, Mysteries, and More. My name's Kaylee.
My name is Desi.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell next to the subscribe button to turn on post notifications. Before we get into this case, we always encourage those who have useful information for any unsolved case to please report to your local police and sheriff department.
This video is not recommended for people under 18. It will contain some difficult topics and letters that we will be discussing, and it may contain some offensive language. If you are not comfortable, please click off now.
During the 1970s, anonymous letters were sent and terrorized the residents of Circleville, Ohio. Circleville is roughly about 30 miles south of Columbus, Ohio. The anonymous letters threatened to reveal secrets of business owners, government offices, school bus drivers, and the list goes on. With that being said, today we will take a look at these Circleville letters.
March 2nd, 1977, Gordon Massie, the superintendent of Westfall High School, received a letter written by an anonymous person. The letter stated, "Dear sir, according to my girlfriend, you have asked her to go out many times and have asked the other female bus drivers too. Due to your position and jobs with you should not do this. Due to your position and jobs with them, you should not do this. This must stop at once for the good for this school and families. If they are not stopped, I will be forced to write to the school board, and I'd hate to do that." End quote. The letter goes on to talk about him supposedly preying on another man's girlfriend. The letter also mentions that there is gossip about Massie having an affair with a married woman. In the spiteful letter, it specifically states, "I suggest you find yourself a pimple-faced whore and start up with her and leave my girls alone." Only a couple days later, the school board would receive yet another letter. This letter urged the school board to look into allegations against Gordon Massie. These allegations mentioned that he used his position to harass female bus drivers. The same day, a third letter was received.
And in this third letter, Massie's fellow superintendent was accused of the same allegations. However, the letters went on to target someone, specifically Mary Gillipsie. She was the main target of all the letters. Gillespie was a mother too, and she was a school bus driver. The writer accused her of having an affair with the superintendent, Gordon Massie. Gordon Massie was married and he was a father. The first letter states, quote, "Mrs. Mary Gillespie, stay away from Massie. Don't lie when questioned about meeting him. I know where you live. I have been observing your house, and I know you have children." End quote. The letter begs her to take this letter seriously, as this is not a prank. Quote, "Everything concerned has been notified, and everything will be over soon." End quote. What is very strange about this letter is because originally in the other letters they claim that Gordon was being a creep, and now they're saying Gillespie needs to leave him alone. Well then, we cannot confirm or deny if these allegations are true or have any truth of them, but whoever wrote them clearly did not like the bus drivers and they did not like Gordon. And if this did happen, then what would motivate someone to write such letters?
Another letter that was written states, "Lady, this is your last chance to report him. I know you are a pig and will prove it. Shame on you out of Ohio." It continues to talk about how Gillespie is supposedly a homewrecker that is tearing families to pieces. Despite Gillespie denying the affair, she continued to receive more hateful letters. Gillespie's husband, Ronald, also received a letter gossiping about this so-called affair his wife had. The letter advised him to catch both in the act and then murder them. The letter ends with, "Massie doesn't deserve to live." He received more than one letter, and Ronald was threatened in multiple letters to take action or there would be serious consequences. The letter specifies what car he drives and where his children attend school. Obviously, he reported the letters to the Pickaway County Sheriff Department. According to Ronald's brother-in-law, Paul Freshour, the sheriff brushed off the letter. They felt like there were more important things to deal with, and that this was not a big deal at all.
After the letters were sent, there were signs about Gillespie and Massie's affair. Paul was married to Ron's sister, Karen Sue. He stated that Ron would drive around town roughly an hour or two before work to take down signs that were placed overnight. These signs did include sexual acts between Gillespie and Massie. According to Fresh Hour, Mary and Ron supposedly knew who was writing the letters. At 10 p.m. on August 19, 1977, 5 months from the time the first letter was mailed, Mary was on her way to Florida with Karen Sue and friends. Ronald received a phone call. In the phone call, it basically reassured him of who was behind the letters. Allegedly, Ronald stated to his daughter he was ready to confront the person behind the letters. He took his truck and drove off with a gun. He was going to take care of business. Only 1 hour later, his car was found crashed into a tree on 5 Points Pike, and unfortunately he lost his life. The wreck was only 10 minutes from his house, which is very tragic. Investigators found that night he was driving, the night sky was clear. However, it showed that it looked like he was speeding and he missed the curb, which caused him to crash into the tree.
Paul believes that Ron was in a high-speed chase, and he states apparently there were bullet holes on the side of the truck. Police did not find or state any evidence of that, and Ron was estimated to have crashed into the tree at 10:25 p.m., and he also didn't have a seatbelt on. Investigators mentioned that he was partially ejected, and he is believed to have passed on the scene, which would be a DOA. However, he wasn't declared dead until 11:15 p.m. when he arrived at the hospital. Ron was only 35 years old, and his death was ruled as an accident, and apparently he had a blood content of 0.16, which was found by the coroner. And of course, 0.8 is the legal limit, so he was double the limit. His brother-in-law says it makes no sense in that this was not typical of Ron. Instead, Fresh Hour believes someone killed him. He pushed the sheriff department to take another look into this case, and after that, a new letter was written after the incident. This letter claimed that the Gillespie and Massie killed Ron.
It mentions that the sheriff, Dwight Radcliffe, covered up the murder. Although Gillespie denied her affair with Massie, after the accident, the two started to talk. Massie did divorce his wife, and the wife's reasoning for the divorce was abuse. The afternoon of February 7th, 1983, Mary drove the school bus, and she was picking up kids from school. And she was about to turn on the same street as the one that Ron crashed when there was a sign with a message. It was about her 13-year-old daughter. She hopped out of the bus and went to remove the sign. When removing the sign, she noticed it was attached to a box via some twine. She decided to remove the box and took it home with her. The box contained a .25 caliber pistol that was fully loaded. Gillespie brought the box to the police, and upon closer inspection, they noticed it was a trap. The gun was supposed to go off killing Mary, but fortunately it did not. Sheriff Radcliffe states, if she tried to pry the sign off the fence, it would have been triggered, but she instead went to remove the box, so that's why it didn't go off.
The Bureau of Investigations in Ohio traced the specific gun to a man in Columbus, Ohio. This man claimed he sold the gun to his coworker Paul Fresh Hour, which leads us to the first suspect. Paul was the original gun owner supervisor at Anheuser-Busch facility. Paul claimed he wanted this gun for protection. Protection against what, you might ask? He claimed his wife and children were the ones being harassed. What a lying sack of shit. December 1982, the gun was sold, and this was only a few months prior to Mary discovering the gun. Paul says it was stolen from his garage, but he failed to report the gun missing to the police. When police interviewed them, he said he knew who exactly stole the gun, but refused to give any names. Fresh Hour did allow police to search his home and car. He waived his right to an attorney and gave police samples of his handwriting. He did a polygraph test and failed. To be fair, though, polygraph tests are 87% accurate, so there is a 13% room for error.
During the investigation, Karen Sue claimed Paul was the person behind the sinister letters. Karen says one of the letters was found torn up in the toilet. Flushing away the evidence, she supposedly found more letters, but Paul denied writing the letters. Investigative journalist Martin Yant believes Karen set Paul up. Suspect numero 2 is Karen Sue. Paul and Karen divorced in October of 1982 after tying the knot 20 years ago. This was a few months prior to Paul purchasing the pistol. Karen claimed that Paul was very abusive towards her early on in the marriage. She did say she filed divorce during that time, but then decided to rescind it. In the 1980s, she says that he claimed that she was having an affair. She says on October 5th, 1982, Paul threatened to hurt her with a broken glass bottle. She says she screamed, quote, that her own mother wouldn't recognize her when he was done with her. Although we cannot confirm that all that happened, we do know, in fact, he did beat her and he did give her a black eye. And after they divorced, Karen's adult son Mark lived with her in a trailer on Mary's property. Court gave Paul the house in custody of both daughters.
Karen said Mark was scared of Paul and what he was capable of. She also stated that her kids received letters and the girls got creepy phone calls. Karen told authorities she found the letters written by Paul in their house 2 years prior. She kept her mouth shut for those 2 years, but when asked for letters, she said, well, I don't have them anymore. Karen, get your shit together in your story. She said there was a letter addressed to Anheuser-Busch, and this was a reference letter he had written. The letter she supposedly found in the toilet had the name Gillipsie written on it. She said many of the other letters found had the same name written inside the letter. She states 4 letters were inside the trunk of Paul's car, and apparently Ron told Paul he needed to mail them? Raymond Trainer, Karen's coworker, backed her up and said to authorities she did indeed find these letters. Unsolved Mysteries TV show investigated this case in 1993. Prior to the production, Unsolved Mysteries received a letter in the mail. Forget Circleville, Ohio. Do nothing to hurt Sheriff Radcliffe. If you come to Ohio, you El Sicko will pay the Circleville writer.
The show went on. A family friend was interviewed by the show. She states that Karen Sue called her before doing the show. She says that Karen told her not to do the interview. The family friend did not listen and proceeded with the interview. She says Karen kept a close eye on those who spoke to the production staff. She parked across the street and supposedly took pictures of anyone who went in. Karen says she did not participate, but there is no concrete evidence that Karen was guilty and did what the family members said she did. Mark Freshour is suspect number 3. He is Karen and Paul's adult son. Mark, like most kids, was deeply affected by his parents' divorce. Martin Yant claims before the booby trap was uncovered, Paul suspected Mark of stealing his gun. Family friend Pam Staten says if it was Mark, Paul would not tell the police. She says, quote, Paul would have died before he would have seen Mark go to jail, end quote. Once again, this is a whole bunch of he said, she said, and pointing fingers type bullshit. So, again, no concrete evidence.
And the final suspect, who is William Massie. Many believe that Gordon's son William was possibly involved. And his parents actually filed for divorce when the letters began. William was in his early adulthood at the time, and his mother even states cruelty is why she divorced. Supposedly, some of the letters were signed by Bill Massie. However, due to Bill living with his dad at the time, it would have been very difficult for him to pull that off. Bill would have possibly been angry because his parents split, and now he was banging in the bus with another woman. Banging in the bus with another woman. But at the same time, it would have been a huge stretch for him to do all of this. October 1983, Paul was arrested and tried for attempted murder. He, of course, pleaded not guilty. He was not charged in connection to the letters. Family and friends were left in disbelief. After a month in jail, he was released on a $50,000 bond, and he admitted himself to a mental ward.
But once again, there was no physical evidence, no fingerprints on the booby trap. For a majority of the time, he did have an alibi. Circumstantial evidence, however, was found. The booby trap box was an industrial chalk box, which he could have gotten from work. 39 of the letters were used against him in court. Handwriting on the box was oddly similar to the handwriting in the letters. Two document examiners stated that the handwriting could have easily been fresh hours. After going back and forth for 2 hours, Paul was convicted for attempted murder. Paul was sentenced to 7 to 25 years of imprisonment. He spent 10 years in prison, and the letters continued even after he was put behind bars. It would have been very close to impossible for him to have been in jail and wrote those letters and mailed them. He was banned from having pens and paper in jail. Imagine that, being banned from having pens and paper. And all incoming and outgoing mail was further inspected. He was in jail in Lima, Ohio, and the letters were postmarked in Columbus, which is 100 miles away. Authorities claimed he had an accomplice that was still writing the letters. After 7 years in prison, he was denied parole because the letters continued.
Paul received a letter a couple days after his parole denial. It read, "Fresh hour. Now when are you going to believe you aren't getting out of there? I told you 2 years ago when we set him up. They stay set up. Don't you listen at all? Nobody wants you out. No one. The joke is on you. Ha ha ha." End quote. 1994, the letters officially stopped after Paul was released. Martin Yance says Paul reached out to the FBI to look more into it. However, the FBI never looked into it and they never responded to Paul. September 11th, 2002, Mark was found. Mark's death was ruled as a possible suicide. Karen Sue told police he was struggling from depression. Paul never admitted he was guilty and passed away in 2012.
Into Reddit comments. The first Reddit post is by XSarahXPoX. 48 hours exposes the Circleville letter writer's secret. Heat Rage 782. I watched and heard about this case on the original Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack Season 7, Episode 6. This is one of the weirdest cases, and it was unique as well as it was baffling. For sure. Oh, this name. Basic White Hood Rat.
Hey.
Police arrest the guy they suspect of writing the letters. Guy gets convicted. Letters continue to arrive in Circleville from Columbus, Ohio. Guy gets put into solitary confinement. Letters continued at an increased pace. Guy's up for parole, gets denied, then gets a letter taunting him. Wild story and terrible police work.
Unban_doctors2043. Huh? Anyways, I still say it was the cop and he set up Paul as a scapegoat. Very possible, but I think it's not as likely.
Jeff Fighter 84. Why has no one looked into Billy Milligan, who lived in Circleville during the letter writing was going on? He committed 4 assaults, 3 in Columbus and 1 in Circleville. Just saying, one of his personalities could have been the author.
One of his personalities. Like, this man has so many fucking personalities that he writes letters and he probably doesn't even remember them. That's wild. My god.
I mean, to be fair, the letters were a bit crazy.
But, like, you would think if you wrote them, you would remember that shit. You can't blame that on your other personalities.
True.
Swepetext. I don't know why anyone should see this other than for entertainment purposes. Some expert claims she knows who wrote the letters, but why trust her when we could know for sure with a simple DNA test? Meaning, establishing which letters weren't hoaxes and get a profile, then get comparisons for that DNA profile. Well, they didn't really have too much DNA evidence anyways. And if people have never had their DNA taken before, they're not going to be found in the system. So... And if you can't get a warrant for DNA, then there's no point.
True. Anon_879. Wow, can't wait. Are they really gonna reveal who wrote them? There's definitely more than one person. I could definitely see where there's multiple people writing the letters.
I could see that as well, because they didn't stop when Paul was in prison.
Nope, they did not.
Nope.
The next one's by Robin Warder 1, The Bizarre Saga of the Circleville Letters, Neutral Went Cold episode.
Deleted. This case was one of my favorite episodes of Unsolved Mysteries. I think it's stuck with me since this episode, and this case has a lot of mysteries all wrapped in it. I got 3 questions for OP. Does anyone involved in the case believe that Mary Gillespie and Gordon Massie only started their affair after he had divorced? Have you received any threatening letters since your research? And the OP responds, I don't think a single person believes that. In fact, on the night Ron was killed, Mary is on a trip to Florida with some girlfriends, and it's believed Massie met her down there to carry on their affair. And also, not yet, but I'm curious to see if the Circleville writer has upgraded to email. Probably dead.
Probably.
I mean, he could be alive, but man, he's gotta be so old. I highly doubt he's very, like, technological at that point.
No, he has grammatical errors, so he probably don't know how to use an email. Or if he uses an email, he probably uses Yahoo.
Or fucking AOL.
Alejandra8634. I lean towards the theory that there were 2 different writers. One who harassed Mary until Ron died, and someone who took advantage of the situation and continued writing the letters for their own personal reasons. Most likely it is Karen. The one thing that doesn't make sense to me, though, is if Karen or someone set Paul up, why would they write letters while Paul is in jail? This seems counterproductive to framing someone, as you don't want to raise doubt that that person is in jail writing the letters. Yeah, that would not make any sense.
But so they didn't believe him anyways, and they still thought it was him writing the letters, even though he was still in jail. So
yeah, true.
To be fair. Non-stop disco. I've always wondered why more people don't think Mary is the most likely suspect. That's what I started to think after hearing detailed descriptions of the situation. The biggest factor that makes me think that is the fact that she so happened to start dating the guy she was accused of having an affair with right after her husband was killed.
That would be a wild twist.
It would. It's like she did this all along, so that way, what was the whole point? She could be with the man she was having an affair with.
Spooky Bunny Carmel. I grew up about 15 minutes from Circleville. The most traffic the town gets is during its annual pumpkin show. It strikes me as bizarre, but I guess all crimes have to happen somewhere. It's cliche, but the town does have a rather stuffy vibe. I mean, there is weird shit that goes around in small towns too.
Toothpaste and cocaine. If you come to Ohio, UL sickos will pay. This is quite possibly my favorite line read by Robert Stack on Unsolved Mysteries. Yeah, he does have a pretty magical voice. It is pretty funny.
Them Ohio people.
Them Ohio UL sickos. It just sounds like someone would say that if they were in Texas.
Jacob Bulla. Finding out that the Circleville writer wasn't this criminal mastermind the show portrayed them, but as 2 merely mentally unstable people is slightly disappointing, haha.
Well, I mean, mentally unstable people can be pretty crafty.
They can be.
Yeah, they're delusional in their own, like, world, so, like, that's pretty crafty in its own self, I guess.
Regular Warthog 7839. Does anyone know if Mary and Gordon ended up married? Did they go on their separate ways? What happened to Mary? Yeah, that's the real story.
We'll never know.
Nope.
Probably. 9 plus 9. I like that. 9 plus 9. This one's a real baffler, one of the best. I saw the Robert Stack version when I was a kid and still have no idea what happened, but I always pictured a little old lady sitting in the corner of a front window just behind the curtains, watching and listening to the gossip of the neighbors next door.
Could be.
That's gonna be me when I'm old.
Hamdinger125. I like that name. Yay, so excited to listen to this one.
It's very interesting.
Yeah,
Very
definitely
mysterious.
check out the guys from BuzzFeed. They have a podcast show called The Watcher, and they covered this one, and it was really
Yes.
good.
They have a lot of good episodes. Check them out, and also check out their Ghost Files series. It's also really good as well. The Circleville Letters are proof that there are some very sinister people out there. Many years, residents were harassed over a supposed affair. Paul Freshour was convicted and served his sentence. However, the letters continued during his time in prison. Could he have possibly had an accomplice, or was it someone else? Why did Mark commit suicide? The Circleville Letters mystery just ends in a circle of questions. So, as always, thank you for listening to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. Tune in next week for another awesome, exciting case. And remember to always keep your eyes open, because you never know when someone's stalking you and when they might send you some fucking letters too.